What's going on, folks? It has been a while since I have had the pleasure of sitting around with these three very handsome gentlemen who seem to just get more and more handsome the longer I know them. What's happening, Allard, Tyler, and Griffin? We're back here for a GM happy hour. Woo, woo.
Sir,
Dang.
excited to be back.
It's been a long time, man.
Yo. Yeah, kind of by the skin of our teeth here, because apparently I wrote an adventure that's longer than 3 hours and 45 minutes.
Oh, they got to take you back to school for that society scenario writing.
Yeah, right.
4 hours, Adam. Damn it.
Yeah. Well, it's only my second one that I've tried to like squeeze into a short amount of time, but it took us what I thought would take 3 hours and 45 minutes, 5 hours and 45 minutes to play.
Dang.
So we're here to talk to you about planning big sessions.
Wait, one shots or big sessions? Because
milestone episodes. But before they do that, in case this is your first GM happy hour, let me introduce everybody to the crew. We got Allard LaRue from the Dice Crisis. He is the GM, and they're running the Second Darkness AP. And they're about done with that, aren't you?
Yeah, we're probably in the last quarter of book 6. So, like I said,
Wow.
STF and Friends, it's the perfect time to pick it up and just start binging.
That's it. Just crush it all in one shot. Awesome. Well, good to see you. We've been hanging out the last couple Mondays. So
I know. Yeah. We're going to have to hang out next Monday, too.
Are we?
Precedent.
We're going to have to.
Oh, we just have to. Okay. I see. I was like, wait, am I missing something that was scheduled? Shit.
Scheduled now.
We also have Griffin Norman from the Hideous Laughter podcast, or Hideous Laughter Productions these days, with everything that you guys got going on. How are you doing, bud?
Doing well, man. I just got out of your game. I mean, not the one you ran, but the one you wrote. We did it significantly faster than your group.
You did?
Yeah. Apparently, my character just got the kill, even though I'm not there.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Ghost kill,
Yeah, you're too good.
I kill him in my sleep, baby. Player, GM, throw anything at me, man.
That's it.
But I'll do it well.
I'm glad to hear it. I hope you enjoyed the scenario. Long-winded as it may be. Yep. And then, of course, we've got Tyler Dykeman, who is on the ones and twos tonight, who's running the production for us, as he is wont to do in these GM happy hours. How are you doing, bud?
I'm doing really well. Spent that no joke, that 5-second stinger that you all saw. I spent 2 hours on that today. It's the first time I've ever done a stinger, so that was fun. But live show stuff. Aside from that, I'm doing really great. I haven't taken part in any STF Con games yet because I knew I wanted to make sure that I was as much prep for this as I can. But after this, we're just gonna hit it hard until like 3 a.m. So it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
Did we mention that you are the GM for the Min-Max podcast? So I just want to make sure everybody knows where we're coming from here.
Guess I kind of forgot about that.
Yeah. And we used to do this once a month, and we kind of hit a natural into that as all of our podcast endeavors kind of expanded and we got busier, and we kind of had covered a lot of ground. But whenever we hit our goal to do STF CONLine again, I thought it would be a great opportunity to get the boys back together and talk about some milestone episodes, sessions, that kind of thing. Obviously, a lot of this is going to be through the lens of us being podcasters. However, I think that milestone sessions happen even in your home games. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about how we prep that, what makes a milestone session, what are the things that you look forward to, and what really takes it to that next level to make it memorable. And I'm Adam, by the way, but
Oh, hey, buddy.
I think, yeah.
They got it.
Yeah, it's all good. So Griffin, how about you start us off? Because I think you've had the most milestone episodes out of all of us.
Oh, you're aging me, Adam. Jeez.
Well, I'm aging your
Stop.
podcasts. Yeah.
Old.
Yeah. And what do you think that a milestone episode is? What does that mean to you?
A milestone episode, I think, is not only your episode 100s and episode 200s and whatever. I know a lot of us like to make those kind of things in the podcast world a big deal, but it's your book closers, it's your big boss end caps, it's your adventure end caps. You've certainly had more of those than I have, doing 3-book adventures.
Mm-hmm.
But these milestone episodes are opportunities to either wrap a story or wrap a plot thread that had been out there, in my opinion, and they are the climax of something. So whether it's the climax being a boss battle, whether it's a climax of a dropped character thread that has been picked back up in this special episode, there are ways to either enhance the action or cap it and end it. And I think there are areas where your players are the most invested. There are spots where it doesn't necessarily end up being a story and book closure thing. It ends up being a character closure thing. And I think that just kind of comes to the crux in these milestone episodes, to maybe not make every big bad a milestone episode, but also not necessarily need to include a big bad or a boss in a milestone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I come from. It's maybe a little scattered thoughts, but that's kind of how I approach it. I really need my players to have the most buy-in possible when I think about scheduling and homebrewing and whatever a milestone episode.
Yeah. What about you, Allard?
Well, I agree with pretty much everything that Griff said. I would just add that milestones can also be hit when like moments from the past are then reflected in the present moment that you are. Like it can be a milestone when like a PC meets somebody from their past again, or you realize that you have had a crucial item that's going to affect you one way or another. Like almost like reveals can also be kind of good in milestone episodes. But I think it's to kind of get that extra player investment. It can be good to have this present moment connect to something in a PC's backstory or something that happened earlier on in just the story that you're currently playing.
Yeah. Tyler? Anything to add?
I don't necessarily disagree with anything that's being said here, but I think obviously you're looking for peak moments, right? We're talking about measuring this in natural story arc climaxes, right? And climaxes are difficult to handle from a storytelling perspective, especially when you're talking about something that's so improv heavy as tabletop RPGs. And because you never know what your characters are going to do. No matter what you plan for a climax, just expect it to get all sorts of fucked up, because you can't plan for every little thing. So what I like to do with these big story moments, I like to take it in two different approaches. There's the planned story moments, and then the off-the-cuff story moments. Planned is sort of things like Griff said, your big boss encounters, your obvious shooting for character arc resolution moments, or even you can foresee to a certain extent things that Allard are talking about, like hey, they have this item and they're going to do this thing, and this is going to occur when they insert the MacGuffin into the slot that it belongs into, and how your players are going to react to it. But I also like keeping it open for the off-the-cuff character moments, because sometimes your players will throw shit at you that you don't really fully expect. And one thing to be kind of on your toes about is how do you take those moments that are off the cuff and turn them into big moments. Sometimes that's when the dice tell a story. This frequently happens when a character dies, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's that's what I was going to add to what you all have already said, is that sometimes milestone episodes happen to you when you're not even expecting them to. And Tyler also beat me to my favorite word, which is improv. And
Improv.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
take a drink.
improv.
Stars
Yeah.
in chat.
Yeah, everybody drink. Take a drink. So yeah, you know, milestone episodes are twofold. There's the planned ones, and then there's the ones that happen kind of just out of nowhere. But either way, you come away from those as those being those most memorable sessions, those most memorable episodes. And a lot of you talked about how closure was a big part of it. I do want to say that I think sometimes a milestone episode can be the introduction of a whole new arc, like a whole, like something that was unexpected, but it introduces a whole new avenue of storytelling that's going to happen, you know. And you want to, and if you're doing that deep into your campaign, you want to make sure that that introduction sticks and has weight, that you can get the players invested in it too. So
Yeah, the turning points.
yeah, exactly.
I often find that we as a group default to milestone episode. We say this milestone episode thing, and for me it always ends up being kind of a milestone arc. And I think
Right.
for a regular table, that's what it's going to end up being. It's more like those, I would even call it like 10 episodes after some really big thing. 10 hours of gameplay that there's so many implications to some of the big story beats and some of the big character resolution moments. A character has their arc fulfilled, there should be room in your plot, storyboard for your party to role play the implications of that. That might mean a character leaving the story for role play reasons. That might mean different directions, different motivations come to the surface. And I think we say episode all the time, but it certainly spans multiple episodes when you think about a podcast, and at a table, potentially multiple sessions. And I think you got to prepare to let it breathe. I think that's the biggest thing with a milestone arc for me, is that I have it all planned in my brain, in my GM brain, and I think this is how they're going to react, and I think this is how it's going to go. And that, to Tyler's point, that's never really how that happens. But that's never really, like, I don't know my friends as well as I think I do, and sometimes they react to something differently than I expected them to. Maybe I even expected something to be like a really resolution style arc for them, and it didn't hit that way. So you got to be prepared to kind of pivot and be on your feet. And sometimes a milestone in your head, it doesn't actually end up being that much of a milestone to your players.
So you mentioned storyboard, Griffin, and I know you and I are very big storyboard people, and Tyler is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're kind of more driven by moment to moment. This
Absolutely.
is responding to the dice, and Allard, you let your players kind of create a spaghetti of storyboards, and then you like to go and pull these little pieces of spaghetti that they're not expecting you to, right? That's a pretty good assessment of our styles.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah. And so, like, when, for the storyboarding part of it, I know that both Griffin and I are often building to what we're calling these milestones, or these like kind of peak moments within the story, even if they're not, the end of the book. There's definitely some parts throughout any of the adventures that we're doing, or any one given book, that we want to kind of build some tension and release to. How much of that, Griffin, I'll ask you, and then Tyler, I want you to give the counterpoint. How much do you think it's worth planning for those rising arcs versus allowing them to happen naturally?
I think when you've planned them well enough and you set the seeds well enough, they do happen naturally. I think you build to something, and we're building, I'm over 200 episodes into my podcast, and you guys are like getting into these huge numbers as well. You're building to certain plot points, and you and I in the early days certainly did like storyboard our entire stories and kind of think about like, where are these major ebbs and flows going to happen. and then you and I planted seeds for 100 episodes. You know, you and I are like the farmer style versus like maybe the hunter gatherer style, where you're taking these bits that your players are giving you, and you're weaving that into something. You and I, Adam, are more like, okay, I'm throwing all this like in now, and hoping that my players then take that and go to this climax,
and that it'll grow.
Can I real quick give fucking Griff a hero point for farmer versus harvester style on storytelling, because that is a great metaphor. I fucking love that.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm a pretty good GM too, guys. Good, dude. I like to do metaphors in my games. You know, the whole game's actually metaphor for life.
So Tyler, Allard, do you have a counterpoint to planting, purposefully planting seeds that you hope do naturally come up later to these, these big cultivated moments, because that is definitely Griffin and I's style, is we put a lot of seeds down in the ground in the beginning of our shows, and I do think that they came about pretty naturally as opposed to that, but there was a lot of, as Griffin said, a lot of planting.
Well, you got to care for a crop, right?
Yeah,
you got to care for a crop, or it's
intending to it, where you guys go out to the woods and find what you can find. What do you think are some of the benefits of that versus the other style?
Well, I think my style has kind of grown via the adventure that I chose for like my first one. Second Darkness, there's a lot of just sandboxy books. Like most of the books are just sandboxes, and like events can kind of happen as naturally as you want to add them to the story. So I think I've kind of grown just because of the sake of what style of game I've been reading. I have tried to like plant some seeds along the way and like make sure that that certain landmarks are visible. But I guess in the metaphor, I don't plant seeds. Like I make the landmarks that maybe they'll go check out because they've seen a similar landmark has a certain fruit that they enjoy in their free time or something like that.
You're a mapper.
I'm a mapper.
You map the areas with
areas, and hope people stumble upon them. But I do feel that like foreshadowing element of planting seeds is very necessary, and it's just, I guess I don't do the storyboarding thing for the longest time now. I've just been aware of what's going on in all the areas, so that if my party decides to check something like that out, I'm kind of ready more to improv than to like play something out that I've prepared.
I love that. And actually, I want to interject here real quick because Eli put something in here that I think is in a very short form what you just said. Eli, one of Allard's players, says Allard plants a lot, but his players are just blind foragers, dependent on smell alone. And I think that actually really speaks to your style quite a bit. I do like, because what Allard, what I enjoy about your style is that you plant seeds that go overlooked, and then you bring them back, and then you bring them back, and then your players are like, oh shit, this is happening because I ignored the initial seeds that were dropped.
Yeah,
or
there's a tree here now. What?
Exactly. And I like that a lot. By the way, listeners, I see that we've got a good chunk of you all in here. Hey, how you doing? Tell us what you would consider as either players, and I'm going to note specifically that there are many players for each of the GMs in the chat right now. Looking at that. So I'm curious that like Steve at HLP or Eli or, Emily, what exactly do you consider milestone episodes, and let's compare that to the GM expectations.
Is that a hashtag player call out?
Hashtag player call out.
Finish your drinks.
No, don't, please. I just opened it.
We gotta do all drunken heroes later, Tyler. Please.
So what I do want to say is that I love everything about what you guys set forward, especially considering your formatting. I mean, media makes a big difference, and we're talking about you being podcasters and setting these things up. And I want to myself particularly lean into Griff's metaphor. I'm a forager. End of story. I don't plant very often. I let my players plant and then harvest based on what they plant, right? At least that's how I like to think of it in this particular metaphor. I'll give an example. This is a little bit of story spoilers for my own pod, but there was a moment in Extinction Curse in Book 2 where they came across a very naturally evil creature, a Barcast, who had been subjugated by something that they had also been subjugated by, the Celestial Menagerie, an evil circus. And I knew that when they were going to encounter this creature that there was going to be some sort of sympathy or empathy between the feelings that occurred there. I didn't know what was going to happen, right? But I knew something was going to happen, and that being, prepare for the harvest. Like, oh, look, there's a big field up there that I could see that has some potential fruit. We'll see what we can pick from it based on what they show. And for that own particular situation, my players took this inherently very evil creature who had been wronged in the same way that they had been wronged. And the story element that came from that is that, like, they leaned into that empathy and then showing the separation between what the base level of the party is and then the source of that particular piece of conflict. So I guess what I'm getting at here is that if going into a moment that could potentially turn into, the inciting incident for something that builds into a climax, the way that I like to play for things is that expect that inciting incident and then plan for your climax, right? Which is your reaction as a GM. For me, that particular situation did not actually occur until like maybe 8 or so episodes after the initial encounter with this Barcast. But it built into, they were in line with this creature, and then it took that moment to really show its true colors as an evil creature, right? And to see how that came into a climax. And I really, really enjoy, like I mentioned, using the harvester forager situation. I like letting my players plant the seeds and then harvest something from those seeds, 5, 6, 7 sessions or episodes later.
Mm-hmm. It's like, I have a feeling we're going to strain this metaphor all night, but,
oh, fuck yeah.
You're fucking welcome, boys.
But like, for the farmers of us, we plant those seeds and then we're waiting for the crops to grow and then we harvest it. You know what I mean? And so there is like much like farmers, there's kind of a schedule to that mode, right? And as a result, I think maybe I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for you, Griffin, but for me, at least, there's a tendency to almost hold on a little too tight sometimes to stories. I think I know I've gotten much better about that as I've matured as a GM, but initially there was like a lot of like really not so much railroading, but like stressing about the crops and hoping that the crops yield the harvest that I wanted, whereas in the hunter scenario, like in the metaphor there, you guys are going out hunting every day, every session, and every now and then, a really prized prey, big piece of game or like a rare orchid or whatever it is that you're hunting and gathering presents itself. What is that feeling like? Where it's like, it's so much more in the moment where I've got to use what I have on me to elevate this moment now, because this is it. This is my trophy catch right here. How do I do it right now? As opposed to having, a calendar of when I'm expecting my harvest to grow,
So I guess in general, if I understand your question correctly, I'm gonna harken back to what Griff said before. When you find those kind of magical moments, that's when you have to like sit back, just let the party do their thing and let that moment breathe. And then the party kind of creates and presents the true meaning from that story beat.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, it's not for me to get in the way and tell them how they feel about it, but for them to just express what their characters are going through.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I
I
think
mean,
what you end up getting, again, I'm going to take it back to the metaphor. I made the metaphor, right?
It's
So,
Griff's
you want?
metaphor.
so the thing about farming is that you get exactly the crop that you're looking for. We have story beats that we want to happen. And whether we say it's organic or not, it's building to those story beats. I planted corn, corn is going to grow. How well that grows depends on how well I planted those seeds and how well, how well my party takes to that story, takes to those beats that I've planted.
you could
And
call the
what that-
party like the weather, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
know, like
the external factor.
Go back to
But at the end of the day, I'm getting corn, and I wanted corn. You guys are getting something that our product is maybe a little bit more GMO. You know what I mean? And you guys, what you're getting is something more organic. But you go out and you can't decide, hey, I want corn.
Mm-hmm.
You might get squash. You might get a mushroom. You know,
somewhere
and
else.
you gotta make do with that to make it into something that is as valuable to your story as corn would be to mine and Adams. So it's a different approach to story beats. It's a different approach to it's a different side of the creative process. Do you start the creative process at the beginning with the seeds, or do you start it at the end with the actual product and turning that into making do with whatever your party finds and turning that into a meaningful moment?
Or even to expand it to a different situation. What I hear there is you're working end to start, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're looking for a particular beat. How do you get to that beat?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really cool.
I think Veridux brings up something really great in the chat, and I as much as we're pushing this metaphor and saying that there's these two things, he says, do y'all think there's any room to switch between the farmer and hunter methodology? Are they mutually exclusive? Of course not. We're kind of positioning these two as ends of a spectrum, and everybody's going to fall somewhere in between, and oftentimes is going to slide back and forth depending on where the game and the story is at that moment. You know what I mean? Like, I would say the first 2 seasons of APA, I was a huge farmer, but I got my crops, and now I'm for season 3, I'm going to be much more of a hunter gatherer, because I've already got my crops growing how I want them to grow. They're there, all that foundation's there for me, and I'm interested to see now what's going to present itself in this high level adventure, and what the players are going to do with all the toys that I've given them and all the backstory that they developed over the last 2 seasons. So it's a shifting spectrum, and don't ever let us tell you that anything is absolute when it comes to GM.
I mean, nothing's binary about any GM process or whatever.
Right. And what's really interesting about this whole conversation is that both, whether your initial or starting approach is with let's keep going back to it, the farmer or the hunter-gatherer metaphor, there is the transitionary stage between the two, which is improv, right? Like, if you have an endpoint in mind, right? For me, I know that certain endpoints are coming because I've read the adventure, right? But I might be looking for that seed that the player unexpectedly produces, right? Like, I know I want this endpoint to happen. I'm not going to plant the seeds, but instead I'm going to look for the seeds as they occur. And then once it happens, you snatch it, and then you put it in the notebook for when you want that thing to happen. Whereas I feel like you guys are talking about the other way around, and Adam, especially with your example, where you've done all that planting in the beginning and now you're waiting for that natural fruit to occur. But in the meantime, let's see what things my players are dropping and how we can snatch that for moments in the future, right? I feel like improv is that bridge between those two things. It depends on what you're watching.
How many drinks you want me to take, man? Shit.
Yeah, you're really getting us. You're really getting us, Tyler.
Just finish your drink at this point.
I know it's been a while.
So listen, you did ask a question to the chat, and we did get some answers, and I want to talk about those before they get buried in the chat.
I've
So
actually
you asked
got a few.
All right, great. So go for it. Yes, the players have responded to your call out.
I'm looking at first. Eli was the first one to post something about this, who is one of Allard's players. And Eli, welcome. We love having you here, man.
Always here representing Big Mood.
Right, Big Mood. The Big Mood says, in regards to those climax episodes, they're GM climaxes, which is things like, in his opinion, first TPK, first familiar death, first NPC hookup scene. So it's really interesting that Eli's pointing out things that are actually not planted seeds, right? Eli's pointing out things that are opportunist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you turn that opportunist moment into this milestone session that we're talking about, and how do you implement those opportunities into milestones on the fly?
I mean, it goes down to being a good listener.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about in that situation. Listening to what your players are picking up as important things to them, and then remembering them, and then bringing them back for them to feast upon once more.
Yeah, being an expert on what your players, when they are role-playing, convey, and also what they have given to you and their backstories. If you know that front and back, you can always find the seeds.
Some of those things that were mentioned too, like first TPK, first, big death or whatever, as they do kind of happen when they happen. And, I think Griffin has said it before, and we talked about it already, is that, you got to it's recognizing that is a milestone moment and not blasting past it, being like, oh, your familiar's died, cool, make another one, we're going to move on to the next thing. Like making some space for, that's where you're going to get the goods from your RP. If your players care about that familiar and you just kind of like brush their death off as just a consequence of playing this game, and then just move forward rather than letting that have the space to be what it is, then you've missed an opportunity for this to be a milestone that will be remembered, and you just made it another day at the table, and so listening, being aware, and then shutting the fuck up as a GM sometimes is honestly, I think that's one of the top 3 pieces of advice I could give to any GM is
it's difficult, but
stop
it's a
talking,
powerful tool,
and listen to your players,
I agree.
let them do their thing,
Absolutely. One thing I would say that can elevate a moment to one of these kind of climactic peaks is taking the rules out of the rules and thinking about what the characters are going through from a non-rules and actually happening perspective. You can take a familiar death and do a whole arc with it. Mm-hmm. If you just think about the idea that a character with a new familiar forms a bond with that familiar, they lose that familiar, and like any other death, that is impactful. And then you can turn that around into even more meaningful moments when, like, mechanically, that familiar just forms again the next day. That character doesn't know that. And you give your player an opportunity to play in that space and role play, like, what is that revelation like? Like, oh my God, I went through this loss, and now it's like getting a new puppy again. You can make these really meaningful spots if you just take we use 10,000 diamond dust. What does that look like when you true resurrect somebody? What happens? Right. Because I'm never going to be the GM that says we should take that out of the game because bringing people back from the dead is cheap and it's not fun for a story. No, it's a part of the game, but let's elevate it. And then that can make climactic moments.
Yeah. They're looking for those opportunities.
Let's pop that corn that we grew. You know what I'm saying?
Give me some butter, baby.
And I like that whole encompassing all of that is looking at opportunities that happen during role play. You don't have not everything that's great is planned for, but knowing where to hop on opportunities based on, like what Allard said, listen to your players. It makes a difference. They're having a conversation with each other when you shut up and listen, right? I do want to take it over to another question that was posted here, and I feel like this one is very specifically targeted at Griff and Adam. Steve from Hideous Laughter Productions says, yeah, when are these boys going to address the fade to black milestones?
Oh, he's talking about sex scenes. He ain't talking about our cut scenes.
Is that what he's talking about?
That's all Steve's talking about. He's just talking about the hoochie coochie, man.
Well, okay. Then
It's meaningful for him.
Yeah, it's meaningful for somebody, right? So
Yeah.
let me take it over to kind of transition that into what like I kind of intended that to be a question for Adam and for Griff. How much cut to black scene do you like plan for in regard to those seeds that you're planting, right? So, and actually this is a question that I'm really curious about as a GM that is just mostly improv, right? That's what I live on. When you have a crop in mind, how far are you willing to push that crop to happen the way that you expect it to happen if watching for the result isn't occurring the way that you expected it to occur? Do you try to force those situations, or do you just be patient?
So when you're talking about fade to black, you're talking about the cutscene style of, is that what you're referencing?
To an extent, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like when you're like, okay, players, sit back, I'm talking now. So not from a podcast perspective necessarily, but a GM around a group of people, when you tell them to, okay, sit back, I'm monologuing now, right?
Right. And you know, okay, I'll for me, if I'm growing corn, I eventually want to cook that corn into a meal. You know what I mean? But I don't know when I'm going to cook that meal, what spices, what I'm going to combine that meal with, until the day comes or the week comes that I'm going to make a corn-based meal. You know, make some cornbread.
I'm making corn.
I'm making corn pudding. I'm making cornbread. I'm making popcorn. I'm making corn on the cob, whatever it is, you know? And so like, I know that I want corn. I know that I want this thing in my story. And I know that this is kind of like the big overarching moment. But as we play week to week to week, how that moment is shaped, how that moment is delivered is changed constantly. You know, I don't usually put pen to paper on a written scene, on a written monologue, till about a week to 2 weeks before I'm actually going to deliver it, because things can change so much. Now I make my notes and I have my outline and everything, but that is a living, breathing document that changes every week that we play, you know, and it isn't until we get to a closer to the meal, to the harvest, or whatever you want to call it, that like I'm actually saying, okay, this is what I'm going to say, because I want to make sure to include what the players have done to have impact on what this scene is going to be. I want them to, when they hear me monologuing, when I'm telling them to shut up for a second so I can get this out, that what they have said and talked among themselves and the actions that they have done, they're seeing results of that within those scenes, you know, that they can say, oh, this happened because I did this earlier, you know?
I hear looking for the opportunity to kick the players out of the kitchen so that you can finish and plate the dish.
Yeah, so sure. Okay.
Like,
yeah,
you guys
That's a
have
part of
brought
it,
me
but
everything you need. Get the fuck out, and I'll plate this thing.
I'll counterpoint that though. More than half of my monologues are written by my players. So it's their opportunity. It's their opportunity to, they give me something written. They say, I want you to deliver this. I want this piece of backstory to come to the front. I want this scene to happen. So I deliver it.
Yeah,
the other times
flashbacks and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the other times I use those are when the characters have earned something that is cheapened by a dice roll, and that is not often. But it is certain times where, like, for instance, and you know, this is spoilers if you're not like 3 books into our 5-book run. But like, we have a character that becomes the Prince of Wolves. I'm not going to make him roll a diplomacy roll to like convince the rest of the werewolves that that's going to happen. I'm going to let him give a speech, and I'm going to describe the fuck out of what is happening there, because it's been over 100 hours of him earning it. It's just fair.
So you're talking about the moment when that opportunity that you're looking for is, okay, this would happen normally within Raw on this particular dice roll, but fuck that roll. Yep. We've been prepping for this. We've been planning for this. It happens.
Yeah.
And that's
and some things are like, as Griffin's saying, some things, yes, we're playing a game where random numbers help tell the story. And, it should. Like, I'm all about like letting the dice say what the dice do. But we're also talking about, this is fantasy fulfillment, no matter what you say about it, and you want your heroes to have the moments that they can have that don't break the mechanics of the game too much. So like, that goes back to that piece of advice. If you don't want failure to be an option, don't make your players roll that die. You know what I mean? Like, it's stupid to have them roll something that they should succeed at no matter what, or that like it needs to happen for the story to progress. Like, okay, the obvious one being, the elephant in the room with the Paizo adventures that lock story points behind a perception check on a secret door. Like, I take those out of APs every time I read. I'm just take that out because that's stupid. Like, I'm not they can't fail this roll or we stop doing the adventure. So like, I either reroute that information to a different place, have it delivered through different means, or I just say that they find the stupid secret door depending on the severity of the story moment, but like, sometimes a dice roll, it gets in the way of a fun game, in my opinion.
I'm curious what Allard thinks of that.
About which part?
About a dice roll getting in the way of progressing the story.
Well, I know from experience that dice rolling can get in the way of player fun. Experienced it, but yeah, I think I agree with you. When you put hours of work into achieving a goal only to miss it because of a dice roll, kind of cheapens the work that you put into getting to that moment. And there's not a whole lot of things that should be kind of just yes or no when you've taken the time to build up your characters and the story to reach a certain climax. I think only really like only fights, really only like big bad encounters, and encounters should have a hard yes you win or no you're dead type of die roll.
So you draw the line between encounter mode and every mode that happens outside of it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go as far as saying that personally, but
as a general rule.
Yeah, like, certainly combats need to be combats and they need to be done by the die and all that kind of stuff. But like, I think Griffin's example was kind of a really good one. This person has been being built up to be the Prince of Wolves. Like, to roll a 1 on a diplomacy check after 3 books of building that up, when it's like clear that that's what should happen. You know what I mean? Like, there's no reason for it not to. So why are we rolling the dice to create that opportunity of not happening?
It literally just creates a moment where it's like, okay, maybe the whole table laughs and I describe how you goofily and awkwardly stumble through this, and then yes, you're still the Prince of Wolves. Or like, we let this be a cool epic moment like it's supposed to be.
To get it back on topic.
That's a transition between rolling it back and just letting me go.
Yeah, to relate it to the topic at hand, that's a milestone moment. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want to cheapen that milestone moment, particularly for that player who's been working towards it for 3 books of play, by goofing on it.
So I'm going to take everything that y'all have said, and I'm going to tell you the way I approach it, because I disagree with all 3 of you.
I knew it.
So we're talking about building into moments that are hinging on a dice roll. A player wants a thing. They're looking at, we are using the Prince of Wolves example, but this can occur in a lot of different like character-driven examples, right? We're talking about branch points, right? Those moments where to a character, the choices that they make or their actions in that moment mean that it's a pivot point in their own character development, right? There's everybody's wants and goals. And like when I approach these things, I let my characters give me their wants and goals. And as they're branching that point out to what they want, I'm developing in the same hand if you fail, this is the shit that happens to you instead. And instead of making it that, off the cuff, like, haha, you failed that roll. Sorry, you suck. You're not actually the Prince of Wolves anymore. Or let's overlook that funny moment and make you this thing anyways. Instead, come up with the real opposite consequences of those failures, right? Like, yes, it's good to deliver what your players want, but for the same reason why I like death to occur as the dice to occur during encounter modes, when I'm planning for that dice roll that is the peak of a character arc, I want the heavy opposite, the antithesis of what they want, and that is the outcome instead. Because sometimes failure is a real fucking thing. And not to like shit on your guys' way of doing it, but I do appreciate it because, again, when you look at session 0 and rule 1 of being a GM, you're there for everyone to have fun, right? And if your players aren't going to have fun, if you give them the antithesis of they're building for, then don't do it, right? Read your table, like read the room, Jerry. If your players don't want to be screwed over on that big thing that they want, don't screw them over. But for my table in general, we just we like the dice rolls, right? We like the outcomes. We like the dice telling the story. So I have to counter that.
Yeah, I think we're not necessarily saying the opposite things though, Tyler, because like what I'm getting at is like there's a point in the story where all of your rolls leading up to this have gotten you to that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my philosophy is the yes/no of a character arc shouldn't be decided by a single dice roll. It should be decided by the 30 dice rolls that led up to that.
Right.
And if I determine that you are on this path and but the basis of like all of your rolls so far, you're here, I don't hinge it on a single dice roll. I hinge it on, that's when I fade to black and do the thing. So I don't think we're like diametrically opposed there, because I do think that what you're saying is completely something that people should do when they think about character arcs, is completely think about the branching path and what happens if you fail. But I just don't think failure can be, again, we talked about like the binary nature of dice and the binary nature of GMing and whatever. A single dice roll feel kind of like cheapens the whole character arc to me. So I don't do it that way, but I still agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I think the difference is our definition of that pivot moment. That branching moment doesn't have to be a single dice roll. It can be an arc in either the left or to the right direction based on what you're hearing by listening to your player.
I think it's important to note that when we're talking about these particular times where we say we're not going to roll a dice, that's a rare instance, right? Yeah. That's not something it's not like, for instance, the arc that I had with Mike in the boxing thing, it's not like I rigged those fights so he would win all of them so he could have his big boxing return moment. Like he had to fight all those fights. He had to discover all those things. He had to roll every roll that was associated with it, but like, and when Oren did his thing at the end of book 1, there was no like, give me on that, even though it was like a really big moment for him. But I also didn't make Ziva roll diplomacy rolls to become what she is now. I'm trying not to spoil too much, but like her arc, she went from, she has achieved a position of power that probably could have been decided by a single diplomacy roll, but all of her work that she did through the first part of her story, like earned her that, and so like I'm not gonna determine her interlude or her like what's happening in her downtime by a dice roll at that point. Like, I guess it's like a similar thing is like they own the APA. I give them in between books 5,000 credits. I don't roll a work, whatever employment check, like it just doesn't matter to me in that's such a minute thing to like force a die roll on the players when like they put all this effort into establishing their background and who they are and where they come from and what they got going on,
Yeah, but I think that's like a different philosophy on things. Like that's a difference between like rolling in the very biggest moment and rolling for the minutia. They're like opposite. You can have the same philosophy or different philosophies on both, but like
right.
it's
it's
different things.
apples to oranges.
It's different
yeah.
things. It's not
yeah.
like the fade to black moment like we're talking about, which is like the pinnacle. It's more like the
Mhm.
I'm gonna let you earn income and I don't really give a fuck. You can't
Right.
fail or whatever.
Right.
Incremental things is I think when it comes to incremental roles can lead up to things, but depending on, we're talking about that branching point in a character arc, a character moment. We're here on climaxes, right?
Mhm.
Do you let them continue up or do you let them turn? Is that the top of that turn that they wanted and starts going down? Not to say that after they fail that branching moment in the character art that it immediately drops down to you're fucked, I hate you, die in a fire. But to just losing that one piece of incremental gain that you've had up until that point too. And I think one thing I'm hearing here a lot is that this isn't black and white.
No.
There's a lot of gray.
Well, and it's also just situation to situation. It's like it's all dependent on the specifics of the scenario, player, and story at hand. We are getting close. Gosh, this is blown by. We've got like
really
8 minutes, and we've really got to be on a tight schedule this time because we are part of STF CONLine right now, so we can't go. I know you guys have things you got to go to. Do you guys want to do a very quick speed question round from the listeners?
I would
be up for it.
Because otherwise we'll just talk forever. So listeners, why don't you give us speed questions and ask us questions that can be answered speedily. You know what I mean? Don't don't ask us questions that take 30 minutes to answer. So let's get your questions when it comes to milestone.
You're giving them a Sisyphean task or whatever.
I know. Milestone episodes.
Yeah.
What you guys got out there?
I'll go to something that happened earlier.
Well, let's cheers first because it's so good to see you guys in this. Yeah, here.
Pleasure.
I got my whiskey bowl.
There were some things that popped up earlier in this the chat here, and I think we naturally bled into some of these during our conversation. Veridux asked a while ago, "Do y'all think there's room to switch between the farmer and hunter methodology, or are they mutually exclusive?" I feel like we
touched that one. Yeah,
that's
the only thing I would say about that is I kind of think the farmer methodology kind of naturally towards the end of the campaign shifts. I think that's just kind of the nature of it because you're doing so much front end. You can't do front end forever.
Yeah, and I want to just add a little bit of metaphor that kind of relates to this. Sometimes you plant some corn, only to when you come to harvest it, you realize that there's a deer sitting there eating it. Now you have kind of an unknown expert.
Dude, that's that classic Allardism that I love. It always comes in out of nowhere with like the most intelligent thing that is said on these fucking shows.
With the deer.
Well,
yeah,
it's a deer. Shoot
it's a deer. It's just so funny because like you always come in with these like really thoughtful statements that just kind of lay it out there. All right, next question.
Let's go to something that Sir Newt said here. How do you deal with players thinking things are too easy?
My players bitch about the easiest of shit. So like, I don't think they ever think things are too easy.
Is that just
that's
not
my
a
answer
problem at your table?
It's not a problem.
I feel like for me, I feel I'm the one who feels like it's too easy for them, and they don't
same
at all.
Right, that's exactly how I feel, Allard. I'm trying to figure out how to make it harder, and they're complaining because I got into my hit points.
I didn't get to play the entire boss combat.
My answer's pretty easy. My players don't say that.
Yeah,
I've rarely gotten that feedback.
Yeah. I think we all try to push our players as much as we can at whatever level that looks like. Okay, next question.
Next question. Veridux says, "What's the best way to fudge rolls without fudging rolls?"
Use a DM screen.
My answer is don't roll.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. That's
yeah,
the
if you're
goes to
gonna
what I was saying
fudge, don't
earlier.
roll.
Like if you need the roll to be something, don't ask for a roll. You know what I mean? Like, or if you're rolling for something that needs to happen for you, it happens. You're the GM. Shit happens. You know, like just do
So
it.
as a first edition GM on like the main show, obviously I do 2e stuff. And one thing I really love about 2e is the degrees of success. And I think that's something that you can kind of use in editions that don't have that to fudge rolls without actually fudging the roll. Um, you're the game master. You can kind of arbitrate the entire game, and you can create a spectrum that is not success failure like 2e does. You can create a success and a critical success and a failure and a critical failure, and by doing that you can create a half measure that maybe doesn't fudge the roll but does something that like I think like the fate
Massages
core
it.
system does really well, which is like success but with like with a caveat, or failure but with some sort of benefit. You can kind of do that, and that's what I would do if I maybe didn't have a certain outcome in mind, because if I did have the certain outcome, again, to Tyler's point, just don't roll. But or like, if your player's expecting a roll, I guess just fake the roll. I don't know. But like, if you're rolling something and you truly don't, you think like, oh, this is going to be super easy and whatever, and I need to think of something in the moment because they did succeed or whatever, you might take that route where you kind of, they still get a bonus for succeeding, but like there's some sort of caveat to it.
Right.
Make rolls that are for nothing. Just roll dice sometimes just to like throw off your players, like that are for nothing. You know what I mean? Like, hold on a second, make a roll. You know.
Allard.
I like to do that for random encounters. Like, no, this is just a random encounter.
All right, next question. We got 3 minutes.
Let's see. We got who would win in a fight between us? Griff wins.
Griffin.
Next question. Newt says, "How do you deal with being called soft?"
Next question.
Soft.
with a SAWFT.
You know
It's
how
a
I
little
deal?
blue pill.
No, I deal with it by playing a system that's not Starfinder. So I just take those players to 2E, and they never call me soft in 2E. You know, like Starfinder is a heroic system where it is very difficult. It's not even the intent to really kill the players in Starfinder. That's a fact of the system. All of
Okay.
you who are out there who have not played, that's a fact of the system.
In the books.
So this is a really good one, and I think this might be the best to end this on. Have you ever accidentally undercut your own milestone moments?
This is a good question.
It's a fantastic question. That's from Erobs. I'll answer this. I undercut my own planned milestone moment because I generally, like we talked about between the farmer and harvester, I primarily harvest, but in the very early stages, I plant seeds and just see what happens with them. One seed, I completely underestimated how much my players hate dealing with intelligent items. And I undercut things that I planned because I was like, oh, they just don't like hearing from this intelligent item. They think it's they just don't fucking like it.
I undercut the end of book 2 of Signal Screens by making it too bleak and not giving proper motivation. You know, like my players were not happy really with where we were at when we ended book 2. You know, now I made up for it with a milestone arc with the whole shadow arc thing, and that got us back on track. But where we ended with book 2, no. They were not happy. They were not enjoying themselves as players at the table, I don't think.
Yeah, I've had a couple moments like that where just the mood at the table gets brought way down. I think there were a couple moments where like Steve is like the last character left, and like the enthusiasm for things kind of died down a little bit, and it was like, okay, well, I'm killing our enthusiasm now to have these like really cool moments in 20, 30 episodes. So I think that's something that I undercut the fun a little bit.
You'll like corn, goddammit.
Yeah, I feel like I might have like undercut the fun a little bit in the moment for like my own arc's sake. So I kind of did it the other way. I don't think I undercut the moment itself, but just like the lead up to it was like, wow, you really created a scenario where we're really fucked, huh? And like everyone's dying all the time.
Cool.
Really
cool.
I don't know if I want to keep going.
Oh man,
you could think of, huh? For me, the one thing that sticks out, I had like one of Eli's characters. He gave me like a backstory. He presented me with a harvest to dish up and present to the people, a little backstory moment, and I hit a seed within there. But then, and it was going to be kind of a between the books thing, but after like the end of book 2 went really badly for the party, I was just like, I can't throw them this encounter now, so I just kind of pushed it away out to sea.
You burned your harvest?
I burned my harvest.
For the sake of the whole farm,
Right.
sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes you got to burn if the section of the crop
is
on fire.
Yeah.
You have to fucking beeline with your tractor so that it doesn't affect the entire crop.
That's right.
boys, the metaphor is strong. Griff,
The metaphor
well
is strong
done.
as fuck.
It's a
That's
strong
good job.
metaphor.
I think that's it, huh? We got to wrap it up here.
Yeah. I don't see any other major questions in there. I thought what Erob put up was a great way to finish this out. So.
Yep. Well, guys, this was a short and sweet one. Makes me miss this a lot. So maybe we can get this going at another time. We'll see. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for being a part of STF Con. Thank all of you out there listening for this panel. It's really cool to get to do some panel type stuff this year, and I hope to expand that next year. Thank y'all, everybody. That's all I got to say. You guys got anything else you want to say?
You want to
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to plug
one more
probably,
time? Yeah. Should we plug our stuff again?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. Hi, I'm Griff. I'm the metaphor guy. In my side work, when I'm not doing big metaphors, I'm the GM of Hideous Laughter Productions.
Nice.
We do first edition, we do second edition. If you listen to STF, you probably listened to us already, but you should.
Agreed. Tyler.
All right. My name is Tyler. Hello, friends and fellow adventurers. I am the game master of the Min-Maxed podcast. We are a second edition primary con podcast, and you can find us on any of the podcatchers. We're running Extinction Curse. We are running a second edition conversion of Return of the Rune Lords under the Mithril Dragon Wagon, and we're currently playing in Book 6, and literally just this week we released the final battle of Book 5. For Extinction Curse. So we're going into the final chapter, and we're already planning on what comes next. The boys love the undead shit, so we're looking at Bloodlords, but nothing 100% confirmed at this point because, that's how it goes.
Allard.
And I am Allard, GM of the Dice Crisis for the moment. Kyle has stepped up to GM once too, and we might have some other little things right after our book 6 of Second Darkness ends, where I step back down into a player's seat. Other than that, we are still planning what comes next after Second Darkness, so stay tuned.
Awesome. I'm Adam. I'm the guy in STF, your host for this weekend. Along with my other castmates from Southern Tomfoolery, we do a lot of Starfinder, and we are branching out to some other systems. And you have seen me play with Tyler, you've seen me play with Allard, and soon Griffin will be joining us for one of those STF and friends as well. So we got a nice little community here in the FFSC. So that's it. That's us. We're the GMs of GM Happy Hour.
What do you want?
Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Much love. Cheers. Raise your drinks and finish them as
finish them, baby.
Yeah. And we'll see you.
We'll see you.
We'll see you. Very nice. We like, hey, Tom, still here. It's your turn.
Nice.
Guys, we're off.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate you making some time for this weekend. It's always a pleasure talking with y'all.